In this episode, we discuss the Alex Galchenyuk, Cedric Paquette for Ryan Dzingel trade between the Senators and the Hurricanes. Daryl Evans joins the show to talk about the LA Kings retool as well as his fabulous journey. Jeremy K Gover joins to talk about the Predators. And is Pekka Rinne nearing the end of his tenure in Nashville? Hit the music. Welcome to Jablam Sports Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Borjaranov, and the mic is always on. You can find me on Twitter at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on the three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with three hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, go to jablamsports.com, see all our podcasts, and even game notes for each episode. You'll get links to all the things we mentioned on this show, including guests. For our podcasts, click on podcasts, and then hockey on this show specifically right on our website. Time for some Trending Now. Our guests for this week's Trending Now roundtable are Colin Cudmore. He covers the Senators and is a writer at Silver 7 Sens. You can follow him on Twitter at CudmoreColin. And Brett Finger. He covers the Hurricanes, senior writer for Canes Country. You can also follow Brett on Twitter at Brett Finger. Welcome back to the show, gentlemen.
Thanks again for having me, Peter. Always glad to be back.
Yeah, very happy to be here to talk about a trade.
A trade which is so rare in this pandemic season of a year. We are a couple days removed now from the interesting trade. The Sens reacquired Ryan Dzingel from the Hurricanes for Alexander Galchenyuk and Cedric Paquette on Sunday. Dzingel, of course, drafted by the Sens in 2011, spending the last 2 years with Carolina and Columbus. And we will talk about this a little bit later on. Galchenyuk does get bounced around for a bit, of course, in the last few years. But again, from the Canes, he gets bounced even further to the Maple Leafs for it was Igor Korshkov and David Orlovsky. So we'll get back to that. But we will talk about maybe who won the trade in a couple of seconds. But these players are all kind of struggling so far this season. And how do you like the trade, or at least the addition of Dzingel back in the fold for the Senators, Colin?
Well, I think it's I was looking at the Dzingel acquisition. I don't think that fans are expecting too much from him, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think this is already kind of a lost season for the Ottawa Senators after their pretty treacherous start to the year. So if he's able to contribute something to winning a couple more games, then so be it. But I think this is kind of already a lost season, and fans are kind of just looking at holding out a bit of hope. I mean, all three players involved in the trade are unrestricted free agents at the end of the year. Yeah. So I doubt that any of these players will be back past that. So Dzingel is kind of just a placeholder now in that left side for Ottawa, which is looking a little bit weak, but maybe he'll fit on that third line behind Brady Tkachuk and then Tim Stützle. So obviously he isn't the top six forward that he once was when he was in Ottawa at his peak, but if he can secure that third line role and bring a bit more speed back to the lineup, then maybe that could be helpful to the kids he might be playing alongside.
We'll see after him sitting in a hotel room maybe for 14 mandatory days in isolation. Brett, the Canes, of course, flipped Galchenyuk and got some assets there, those prospects. And where do you see Paquette fitting in with this team right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Cedric Paquette, he funny enough, he already played a game for the Hurricanes last night. He slotted in as the fourth line center. The expectations for him are obviously not very significant for what he's going to bring. I think Rod Brindamore, the Hurricanes head coach, views it as getting a guy who A, has won a cup, B, has been around the league for a little bit. And he brings something that I guess not a lot of players on this Hurricanes team bring, and that is his physical edge. He was already a pest last night in his debut, and he looked fine, all things considered. I think he drove down from Ottawa to Raleigh, which is quite the drive, and he did the drive with his dog. I think that's technically why he didn't need to quarantine, because he drove instead of flew. I think that's how that one worked. But yeah, if the Hurricanes can get solid fourth line play from him, and it was a bit of a weird situation with Ryan Dzingel, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. But if he can just kind of be a guy that you can rely on as a fourth line center, and he can bring the physicality and kind of the edge that the Hurricanes maybe lack right now, it can be a good fit. They had Morgan Geekie, who's a young player who was playing at the fourth line center. He was, he was kind of a guy that, or he has been a guy that, he has some skill, but maybe over the long term, it's going to take a little bit of work for him to kind of carve out an identity playing as a fourth line center. Because up to this point, he had been a producer in the WHL and in the AHL. So it might take a little bit of time for him to kind of get there. But I think the hope for Cedric Paquette is that he can step in and just kind of be a steady fourth liner who won't hurt you. And you're not necessarily expecting him to make a huge impact.
And following up with Dzingel there, why was he shipped out of Carolina, Brett?
Yeah, so when they brought him in, he was coming off of some good years in Ottawa. He went to Columbus, didn't work out quite as well for him there, but the Hurricanes still decided to roll the dice in hopes of him being a quality top 9 secondary scorer. It didn't work out. The first 20 or so games, he looked pretty good. He was playing with Eric Haula, who is now in Nashville, and Marty Necas, who was a rookie at the time, and they were a really strong middle six scoring line. They were productive. They did their job well, and I think early on the returns were pretty good for him. But as time went on, Eric Haula kind of cooled off, and things didn't work out with him in Carolina, and he ultimately got traded. And when that happened, it kind of muddied the waters, I guess, with him, with Ryan Dzingel. He didn't really find a spot in the lineup to stick. And as the season went on, he was a healthy scratch a few times. He was kind of a guy that very easily found himself kind of disappearing from the game. And obviously they wanted a little bit more out of him. Coming into this year, the Hurricanes really needed another player in the top 6 to produce. And really it came down to Nino Niederreiter or Ryan Dzingel. And Nino Niederreiter has been excellent out of the gate for Carolina. And Dzingel is still kind of in that in-between spot where you don't really know what he's going to bring on a given night. And his skill set definitely isn't for the bottom 6 with how he plays. So it just didn't work out. The role didn't work out the way that Carolina probably hoped.
Colin, with Dzingel, obviously we're going to have to wait a while to see him play. Which line mates do you think he will play with once he is able to? And if he can turn it around, is he just another asset to be moved at the deadline?
I mean, potentially. If you're talking about specific lines, I think that's kind of a moot point right now, given how much things are moving around in the bottom 6, especially. Yeah. Even in the top 6, lines are not solidified. Josh Norris can be on the top line one day and then on the fourth line the next day, and it's really unstable right now. Maybe he'll play with Derek Stepan, which would actually be kind of funny, given that if you look at the trade tree, the Sens traded Dzingel for 2 second-round picks, one of which they traded to acquire Derek Stepan. So it'd be a bit of a circle there. But I mean, the Sens are dealing with quite a few assets that are in that sort of in between stage of whether they might be useful enough to even get a pick back for them. I mean, to be fair, I didn't expect players like Alex Galchenyuk or Cedric Paquette to be valuable enough to even get a player of Dzingel's caliber back anyways. So, so Dzingel is probably on the higher end of that right now, given how tumultuous some of the Sens' recent signings have been. So if they can get another pick for him, then I think that might be the best case here for Ottawa, given just that they're still in the rebuild and they need as many picks as they can. That's really where the franchise is still headed at this point, is another long year of rebuilding. So if Dzingel can play another part of that and get them another, I don't know, a third second round pick like he got the two last time, that would be all the more helpful, I guess.
And in the end, the Leafs pick up Galchenyuk, and I think it's more or less a stopgap with a player like Jimmy Vesey not fitting really in well with the blue and white so far early on this season. And I think he might try to see if they can test him out in a middle six wing spot. And as per Elliot Friedman, the Leafs have also been looking at players like a Granlund, and other rumors are maybe a Rickard Rakell. And of course, if you want to acquire a guy like that, or one of those kind of players, you're going to have to send out some decent assets. So we'll see what the Leafs can do with Galchenyuk, if they can pick up the pace, or if he can at least fill in a void that VC has left off, especially with the few forwards that are out right now with injuries. So we'll see how that looks there. What do you guys think overall about the trade? Is it basically just a moot point and just a test and to see what's going on with all these kind of players?
Personally, I feel like if you want to talk about who's the winner of the trade, maybe I'm a bit biased here, but I think Ottawa definitely came ahead with the most value here. I think if you look at statistically, if you look at Galchenyuk and Paquette, they were not useful players at all in Ottawa, and they weren't even useful players in previous seasons either. So it was predictable when the Sens signed them that they weren't going to be very valuable. So the fact that they were able to recoup any kind of value for them, to me at least, was a bit of a small miracle. I think that the results they were putting up were quite dreadful, to the point where I was worried they were going to be able to recoup any value at all for them. So the fact that they were able to get someone like Dzingel, who was at least a bit of a roll of the dice here, given that he's had a slow start and has been productive in years past, I think that's a decent bet. Where someone like Galchenyuk, even though I think he's young, he just hasn't worked out in so many places now that I don't even think he's a gamble anymore. I think you kind of have to expect that he's going to be putting up poor results when he hits the ice now.
With regards to who got the better end of the trade, I think with regards to upside, it's absolutely Ottawa. If Ryan Dzingel gets a shot in a more prominent scoring role, and he can kind of get back to being the productive player that he has been in the past, and even showed in spurts last season in his first year in Carolina, it's definitely a higher reward potential for Ottawa. But on Carolina's side, you had a guy who just wasn't working out. His role wasn't there, and he was really the odd man out. And they had to, or they made the decision to move on from him. And I guess they did the best they could to try to get someone who could fill a particular depth role for the team. So I like the deal for Ottawa quite a bit. I think Dzingel has, obviously, he broke in the league with Ottawa and had his best moments with Ottawa. And I think it's a deal that makes sense for Ottawa for sure. And Carolina has some advantages that they see in this trade too.
Dzingel being Ottawa's only player left from the 2017 playoff run now. They traded everyone else. They got someone back for that now. So.
Yeah.
And there you have it. Sounds like the Senators won this trade. Again, thank you guys for joining the show. You can catch Colin on Twitter at Cudmore Colin and Brett at Brett Finger. Thank you guys for joining again.
Thanks so much, Peter.
Thank you.
Let's go to the West Coast. We'll be team isoing right now the LA Kings. But first, I have to give my guest a proper introduction that he deserves. And bear with me if I screw this up, Daryl. Hailing from Toronto, Ontario, drafted 9th round, 107th 178th overall by the Los Angeles Kings. Wearing number 15 for the Kings, he played in 113 NHL games with 22 goals, 152 points in your career. And out of those 22 goals, one was a pretty big one.
Jerry Korab rushed up to make that a 3-on-2. So the Oilers had to try and force the shot quickly by Smith. They did that. Smith from 45 feet. Fuhr saw it all the way, but he was a little shaky in making that glove save, as you might expect. We played 2:32 in overtime. On the draw, shot by Evans, he scores! Oh! Oh! Look at him!
So this is in Game 3 of the series. Oilers versus the Kings in overtime in a big comeback.
Daryl Evans wins the game for the Kings. Daryl Evans shot it from the right side up under the crossbar. And the Kings have taken the lead in the series. They came from behind to win it in overtime, 6-5, and the Kings lead the series.
I love the part where you're just ecstatic and you're skating backwards and then you're kind of like dancing there. What was it in that moment? How did it feel?
You know, it's really hard to describe. It was just, sheer emotion. Something like that happening comes so unexpected, and literally the drop of a puck, and the game just all of a sudden turned from a 5-0 deficit to a 6-5 overtime win. It was an incredible feeling, but I think I probably learned to appreciate it, more as the years have gone by, to see how special that game really was. But the emotion that particular night, that moment, scoring that goal, it was a dream come true and something I'll never forget.
It's interesting that we're bringing this up, and I'm wanted to have you on the show to talk about the Kings, and then also tonight, with that game being of course, the miracle on Manchester. Tonight, just finishing watching the Leafs collapse in a 5-1 game against the Senators, them losing in overtime 6-5. Interesting that this just happened to be the same day I was going to talk to you about this game.
You know what? The game of hockey is a crazy game. You never know what can happen on any given night. You look at a team that could be so dominant. On paper, they look like a better team. They're more experienced. And yet, so quickly, things can change. Today's game, there's so many power plays, and things that come up at different parts of the game. Back maybe 15, 20 years ago, a 2-goal lead. I remember even when the Kings were, in their heyday, back in 12 and 14, they get a 2-goal lead. You could go home and read about it the next day in the paper. But right now, 2-goal, 3-goal deficit, anything's possible. The players today have got so much skill. There's so much offense in the game. You can't clutch and grab like you used to, back in the old days. So it really does, favor some incredible things for happening for these skilled hockey players today.
Yeah, I want to paint a picture a little bit for the listeners, and of course, some of them are much younger than you or I. It was Edmonton with that dominant 80s team. At that season, 111 points, and the Kings finished 4th in the division. Of course, the Oilers were first, 48 points behind them. Big playoff series. It was 5 at the time. That's what it was. Oilers, of course, had the Gretzkys and the Messiers, Currys, and Coffeys, and Kings, led by Marcel and Dion in that Triple Crown line with Taylor and Simmer. I like the quote from the great Kings play-by-play announcer Bob Miller, was saying that he was so upset because he thought, we do this every time. We get everyone in LA excited about hockey and the Kings, and then go right in the dumper. And the owner of the Kings, obviously Jerry Buss, also left the game early. Down 5-0, you come back in the third, 5 goals, overtime winner. It's astonishing. But one thing I kind of want to ask you is, who spoke up? What happened during that intermission?
Well, in the intermission, I don't know if you recall, but at the 9:56 mark of the third period, myself, along with a handful of my teammates and a handful of Oiler players, we got those, at that time, those 10-minute misconduct penalties. So we were actually ejected in the game. So there was a handful of us that spent the remainder of the game in the locker room, listening to the game and Bob and Nick calling the game. And it was pretty incredible, just to kind of listen to it all unfold and the way things happened. And, I think as we saw things go, it was just going to be a matter of, was the clock going to hang on for us? Were we going to have enough time, to complete the comeback? But, momentum turns so quickly. I think when the guys came in between periods, the emotion was still there, the high fives and things like that. But, one thing was now to kind of bottle all that energy that we had. I mean, incredible, to come back from being down by 5, but if you don't finish it off, it really doesn't have any meaning. It's, if you lose at 6-5, what's the difference if it's 6-5, 5-0, who cares? The end result is all that matters. So I think that, a couple of the veteran players, they were excited. The young players, guys like myself and, the Steve Bozaks and the Doug Smiths and the Bernie Nichols and all that. We're a bunch of young kids, even like Jay Wells, Mark Hardy, they're only a few years older than us, but we had all kinds of emotion. So we were dialed in with that regard. The veterans were definitely speaking up to kind of, get us to channel our energy and it proved to work out. You look at the first shift of overtime, Mario Lessard came out chasing a puck around the blue line. Looked like, the Oilers were going to be able to put it into a vacated net. It was just, it was just meant to be. By that time, you could just see that everything was kind of falling our way from the little things. They had a couple of breakaways in the third period that, normally they would miss. And they gave us every opportunity to do eventually what we did. And it made it a special night.
Even before watching that game, I was looking at your stats and that you were left wing and you're left-handed, which might be maybe a little bit uncommon, maybe not as much now, but on that actual play too, I was like, okay, he's on the right side and he scores right off the face-off. Now, would that have helped your offense? And as well in today's game, switching hands on that wing might create more offense, no?
Well, I'm right-handed for one thing. I shoot left, but I'm right-handed.
Okay.
Yeah. I shoot right. I shoot left, but I'm right-handed. It was kind of just starting to come out a little bit where guys were playing a little bit on their off wing.
Yeah.
Because what it does is it keeps the puck in the middle of the ice.
Yes.
And it improves your angle from, where you're going to be shooting from. The interesting thing on that face-off was I was lined up alongside Kevin Lowe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at that time, there was only one hash mark. So you could put a stick in a guy's midsection beside, you could latch onto him. You could almost grab his arm if you wanted. And for whatever the reason, he must have been clutching me or whatever. I backed off like 2 or 3 feet to my left, which in turn improved my angle, but it created the separation between he and I. And when Doug Smith won the draw back between his legs right behind him, I was able to just walk into it and unload. And, we all know, where it ended up from there. But, had I stayed on the hash mark, I probably would still be sitting on the end of Kevin Lowe's stick right now.
You continued playing another full season the following year with the Kings and additionally with the Capitals and, of course, your hometown, Toronto Maple Leafs. At the time, how did it feel putting on that blue and white sweater, scoring a goal, and playing a couple games for the Buds?
It was incredible. I think, every kid that grows up in Toronto and Canada, for all that matter, you want to be, you look at the original 6 teams and, myself, when I was growing up in the 60s, watching the Maple Leafs capture, Stanley Cups as a real young kid, listening to the games, in the car on the radio and Hockey Night in Canada, of course. So to put that blue and white uniform on was something real special. Playing in the old Maple Leaf Gardens was an incredible feeling. And then be able to score a goal as a member of the Maple Leafs, it just kind of, it all came full circle right there. It was, I know it was only a blink of an eye in my career, but it was definitely, a special chapter that I got a chance to put that blue Maple Leaf on.
I'm glad you said full circle because you ended up playing in Europe for a bit and then you started working at the Cadillac dealership. While doing that, you were coaching for UCLA, back-to-back championships with the Pac-8 and the national championship the following year, earning yourself Coach of the Year. Now, tell me how part of this story goes. The dealership had a sponsor with the Kings, and then they needed someone to do a commercial, and then what happened?
Okay, so yeah, it started out that I was actually at the airport one day picking my brother up, and that was when you could go to LAX. You could bring your barbecue, you could set up, make hot dogs out there, and out on the while you're waiting for somebody to come off the plane. Unlike now, but my brother was coming off the plane, and as I was waiting for him, I was literally outside my car on the curb, and Sam McMaster, who became the general manager of the Kings, he was on the same flight as my brother. Well, Sam and I, we go way back. He was the general manager of mine when I played youth hockey, and then when I played junior hockey in Niagara Falls. And, we just got in a small conversation. How you doing? Everything's great. What are you up to? I'm managing a Cadillac dealership. Oh, he goes, give me your card. I'm going to need a car. He says, I'll give you a call in the morning. And I'm sitting there going like a lot of people here in the car business, I'll give you a call in the morning. And, you never hear from him again. I'll be damned, within an hour of the next day, Sam gives me a call and he says, yeah, I got the green light. Go ahead and get a car from you. So we ended up putting a deal together with the Kings. It involved sponsorship and things like that. So we had a article in the program, and then we got some season tickets, and we got a 30-second radio commercial in exchange for some cars. Mm-hmm. So we pieced it all together. Everything had been satisfied other than the 30-second radio commercial. Mm-hmm. And people at the dealership, or pardon me, people from the Kings said to me, they said, hey, Daryl, when's the dealership going to send somebody over? Their advertising group is, not done the radio commercial yet. So I talked to my boss and I said, we're wasting time. What the hell are we doing here? They played so many games and, we could have been on the air. So he goes, well, why don't you do it? I said, I've never done anything like that before. So I ended up getting sent down to do the game. And Nick Nixon, who is my partner today, he was doing the Kings games at that time. So we had arranged to get there one day before a Kings game, maybe around 4:00 at the Forum, and cut the 30-second commercial. And then, they give me a couple of tickets to watch the game, and that was going to be it. So when I got to the game, Mike Allison, who was Nick's color guy at the time, he wasn't in the booth yet. And I said, where's Mike? And, he said, he goes, he got some bad news this afternoon. Somebody back home either got sick or had passed away, and he was making arrangements to be able to fly home the next day. I don't know what day of the week it was. I can't remember, but the Kings either played the next day or the day after. And I said, well, who's going to do the game with you on, Tuesday? Mm-hmm. And he goes, oh, geez, I hadn't thought about that. I says, I'll do it with you. And he goes, have you ever done that before? I said, no. I said, but, I said, who are you playing? And they were playing St. Louis. And so I took a media guide home with me, and that's how I did my first game a couple of days later. And then the Kings after that season approached me about, coming on full time to do the color. I just established myself in the car business. I just bought a house, had new child. My son was just born, and financially we couldn't come to the terms where I was at. So they said, okay, well, we'll stay in touch and we'll keep things going, and that we did. And then within the next year, they through the course of that year, they brought in Cami Granato. And Cami was going to rejoin the national team. So she was going to miss, at first it started a handful of games or so. It turned out, I think, to be about 17 games that I ended up calling. So I got to get my feet wet a little bit more. And I really got a good feel for, what the job was and how much I missed the game. And, by the end of the year, the Kings approached me again about coming on board. Staples Center was getting ready to open the next fall. And with my sales experience, he asked me to be the director of suites and premier seat sales down at Staples Center. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, we'll see. We'll take that from there. Within a short period of time, and I'm talking just a few weeks, they've broken ground at the training center in El Segundo, and they asked me to be the general manager there as well. So I became the general manager of the training center. I was director of suites and premier seat sales downtown at Staples Center. I joined the Alumni Association as their presidents. We developed an alumni association, and I was filling in part-time on the radio. while still managing a Cadillac dealership. So I had all kinds of hats and helmets going at that time. But it was an incredible time. At the end of the season, when they made the decision to offer me the job the next year, the full time on the radio, and I accepted it. And it was something that I never regret, never look back on. It was an incredible decision. And I'm forever grateful, thankful for them for the opportunity to do what I'm doing and to be able to have done it as long as I have. So it's amazing how quick the years have gone by. That was back in 98, 99.
Wow, I love the story. That's fabulous. And 15 years or so now, that's amazing that you've been broadcasting for the Kings.
15, where's your math? That's over 20. Come on, let's get with the program. Holy gee. Thank God you're not my agent. I wouldn't want you to be working my contract out.
This is why I'm trying to do a podcast and broadcasting. My numbers are always way off.
So that $10 million you said you were paying me, it's only about $6, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So a friend of the show, Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman, I asked him something. I was like, I'm going to have Daryl Evans on the show, and I asked him what I think he should ask you about, and he told me that he's like, and this is a direct quote, he's like, he's the best dressed medium member in the entire NHL, and it isn't even close. So where do you get the sense of style from, and why is it above and beyond the rest? Are everybody just slackers out there, or are you just that professional and slick?
No, you know what? There's some great dressers out there, and I think it goes back to, again, as a youth hockey player, I remember the first suit that I was able to afford and buy, or my family was able to afford and buy. It was a 3-piece suit, and I always thought that it looked really cool, getting dressed, and it just made you feel good. And then a couple of teams that I played for, like when we'd go on tournaments, we'd have maybe a sport jacket with a pair of slacks that matched, or, a sweater or a jacket or something like that. And, it was something I always took pride in. And, I think then as I became, as I turned pro from junior, I just that was something I just continued to keep going with, like at the time down in, New Haven, wearing leather pants and leather ties, wearing a black fedora, black leather coat with a fur collar and all that kind of stuff. But I think when I came back out here, to Los Angeles, and probably more so that, when I got involved in the broadcasting, again, it's just, I think it's a great way to get yourself in the right mindset is, I think if you feel professional and preparing yourself, everything else is kind of going to follow pace. I've always liked things that are a little bit different, and I'll never forget I used to get my suits made in Montreal from, a family that made suits for most of the guys for so many years. Mm-hmm. Father had the business, and, I used to get suits from him for years. And then the father, had passed, and, things started to slip a little bit there, not having that proximity to be able to, walk into the store or to be able to talk to the tailor, readily. I ended up making a decision, and I ended up getting my suits made here in Los Angeles. And the story with that one is we had the ice crew that goes on the ice, at whistle stops and things like that, mm-hmm. in between periods. So I go out and I skate with that group of kids, and I always ask, what do you do? I'm in school, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And one of the young ladies had said that she was in fashion school. I said, oh, men's clothes. She goes, no, women's clothes. I said, well, if you ever get to men's clothes, I said, let me know. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of time goes by, and she comes back to me. She goes, Daryl, she says, I'm selling men's clothes. I said, okay. She said, do you mind if I come by and show you some of my books and things? So she brings me back, the plaids and the checks and, a lot of the traditional type of stuff. And I said, I need something a little bit more alive. I said, she goes, and it was almost like a light switch went off, like with Jim Carrey and Dumb and Dumber, when they came out with the orange and green tuxedos or blue tuxedos that they got. Yeah. And she come back the next week with some cloths, and I fell in love with them. So she's been making my suits since. It's to the point now where I actually go down to the fabric store. I pick out the cloths with her, and then I let her work her magic. She puts together, different little styles, and we talk about things. And but I have a great time doing that. We go into the store, and I'll go in just like with a t-shirt and shorts on, and the people think we're shopping for her because she's kind of all fashioned out and all that. And I said, no. I said, this cloth is for me, and they get a kick out of that. And then I show them some of the pictures, but I have a lot of fun with it. I like different colors. I've got a lot of energy, and it's just I think it shows like in what I wear that that I enjoy that. When the holidays come out, I'll wear a Christmas suit, I'll wear a Halloween suit, I'll wear a New Year's Eve suit, I'll wear something with hearts on Valentine's Day, Pride Day. I'll put the Pride colors on. I mean, I got a suit for St. Patrick's Day. It's just so we have a great time with those, and it's to the point now where we auction some of those off on the holiday suits for charity. So it's a way of raising some money for our foundation. And like I say, I have a lot of fun doing it. And I look forward to buying new suits and creating new suits and getting dressed for a game.
That's great. I did tell you that we were going to talk about the Kings, so let's do that now. It's been one of those years, and it's like the Kings are doing a bit of a retool now. They're last in the Honda West Division. The Honda West Division, yes. They're 4-5-1 in the last 10, but the goal differential is only a -4. Kopitar Anže is doing extremely well so far this season. 17 points leading the way, and he's an assist a game player so far with a 13 in 13 games so far. How are things coming together for Anže?
Well, I think when you look at older players, especially when you have so much mileage, like guys like Kopitar and Brown, even Doughty and Jeff Carter and these guys, these guys are, 1,000-game guys. A lot of playoff games, the runs in the playoffs that they've had. So when you get a chance to get a break, you really become rejuvenated. I think, and we've heard other older players talk about it in the years in the past, it kind of extends your career. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a rejuvenated Anže Kopitar. He's rested. I think because of the young players that are coming up now, there's an excitement there as well. He's tutoring these young guys. So he's playing with a lot of energy. He's still playing in all the critical situations. And he's probably got a lot of pride in his game. He wants to maintain being that number one center on the team. And he's an elite player. And to his credit, he still plays with the best of them. He matches up against anybody in the NHL on any given night. If he can't make it with the speed in some cases when you're up against, let's say, a Connor McDavid or a McKinnon or something like that, that's where the mind comes in. And the hockey mind, he's got an incredible hockey mind. It's great being around him every day, but not surprised to see what he's doing. And as some of these young players transition, you're going to see him kind of pass a little bit of that responsibility up. But in his entire career, he's been pretty much a point a game type of guy, and I don't ever expect that to change from him. He's a winner. He knows how to win. He's a captain of the hockey club, and he does a great job at creating an environment for these young players that have been drafted from the Kings in the last few years to come in and thrive.
Calvin Peterson has a 2.49, I believe, goals against average and a great save percentage as well. He's looked great so far this season, playing 2 games more than Jonathan Quick. Is it changing of the guard time between the pipes at the Staples Center?
Nope, not at all. That question's been posed to Todd, as most recently as today. Mm-hmm. I think when you look at it, this year in particular, you got a 56-game schedule. You got a real compressed schedule. And, you're going to have games that are going to be, postponed, rescheduled, and things like that. You need 2 goaltenders. Mm-hmm. For anybody to believe that they can get the job done with 1 goalie, it's crazy. It's not going to happen. Is your one guy going to get a few more games? Yeah, probably. But again, we're looking at a small sample piece right now. In the early part of the year, Todd McClellan said today that Jonathan Quick was real solid, and the Kings had a couple of games in front of them that were subpar, not being Quick's fault. The last few games, Peterson's had an opportunity, and he's kind of, he's taken advantage of it. But I would expect come the end of the year, you're going to see the games pretty much evened out. Jonathan Quick has got too much to give to the game. He's got too much to give and show Cal Peterson in games and practices. What a great tutor he is for Cal Peterson and the rest of the young goaltenders in the organization. And that's not only from what he's doing during a game, how he performs in practice, the way he conducts himself in a game where he's not maybe, the one that's going to get that start that particular night. But Jonathan Quick, if you're looking at a goaltender you want to hang your hat on, he still got it. He showed that at the end of last year. He showed that at the beginning of this year. Cal Peterson, definitely he's the goaltender, of the future for the Kings. There's no need to rush him getting there. He's shown that, that he can play. But again, he's still got, a very small sample size of the amount of games. The only way he's going to get better is to continue to keep playing, but he's off to a great start, and he's got a great partner with him in Jonathan Quick to be able to kind of pull him along and show him the ropes day by day.
Great friend of the show, Dennis Bernstein. He spoke with me last on the show during our preview episode, Season 6, Episode 3, our Honda West Divisional Preview episode. And, of course, Kings fans can go check that out on our website. We have our predictions of the season. We talked about Gabe Vilardi, and he also recently told me to ask you about Gabe. So do you have any insight there?
Well, I think Gabe is coming along nicely, as a lot of young players. He's got a responsible position. When you play the middle of the ice, you got a lot of responsibility. Down in the defensive zone, you got to come down and support the D. You got to support the wingers. You've got to win your share of faceoffs. He's up against guys that are, a lot more experienced. He's gotten stronger, over the summer. This is the first summer that he actually had a chance to train as opposed to have to rehab. And we've seen that at different parts of his game. It's still a challenge, night in and night out. They've elevated his minutes on some games, and he's taken on more responsibility, when guys have been out with COVID and that. And I think he's responded nicely. He's got great vision on the ice. He's a student of the game, and he's got, a great teacher and a guy like Kopitar and Carter, those type of guys to be able to learn from. He's a big sponge. He's absorbing everything that's out there, and he'll continue to keep getting better. I mean, he's going to have his little, peaks and valleys, but I think by the end of the year, I think we're going to see a real, consistent player, and he's only going to get better as time goes along. He gets a feel for the league. This year, playing only against 7 other teams in your division, tomorrow they're going to play Minnesota, for the 5th time this year. So maybe some of those matchups you'll start to see, what he's been able to, digest in those first 4 games against those guys. And then, the same thing with the other teams as time goes by. But, he's going to be just fine. It's great to see that he's staying healthy. He's in a great frame of mind mentally. And, the things that those are the things that matter. He's got the skill set. He's got all the tools. He'll continue to keep working on his skating to try and pick up, a half a second or a tenth of a second here or there. And he's only going to get stronger as he gets more mature. So I think just patience with him, and, he's coming along nice.
I want to throw a little bit of a hard question to you at the end here. The Kings are in a bit of a retool rebuild here, and everybody's talking about how strong and how amazing that they have of this prospect pool, the strongest that maybe in the entire NHL. How soon do you think they can right this ship? And if it is a few years away, is there any possibility of moving away from some of these big names on their main core?
Their prospect pool is ranked number 1 in the National Hockey League. Mm-hmm. And that's a credit to, Rob Blake and, Luc Robitaille, management, ownership, the scouting staff, for the patience that they've shown, retaining their draft choices. When things aren't going well, it's easy to sit there and, sell everything off and then start from scratch. Well, the Kings are a little further beyond that. Their core, the core players, the veteran players that are still with the team, Jonathan Quick in goal, Drew Doughty back on defense, Carter, Kopitar, and Brown up front. All those players are contributors. They're not passengers. They're still leaders on your team. In this particular year, especially with the young players, the guys like the Byfields and those players and Kalievs, that there's no junior hockey going on in Canada. this is a great opportunity to take advantage of these guys being able to play in the American Hockey League. They get a chance to play against men. These guys can play in a National Hockey League. There's so many guys in the American Hockey League that can do that. I think the Kings are showing a lot of patience in the way that they're doing it. We saw Kaliev. He comes up, he scores a goal. He goes back down. Everybody, why is he not staying? He scored a goal. He's still got a lot to learn about the game. When they do make that transition, the Kings want to make it where they're going to be here to stay. And because of the year that we're going through this year, so many of these young kids are going to get a chance to play a few games. But which is also important for these young guys to grow together in Ontario right now. Because if you look 5 years down the road, you would think that 8 or 10 of these guys, including the Kempes and the guys that are on the team right now, those guys are all going to be the core of the hockey club. So let them grow together, and they're going to get their opportunity. I don't think the Kings are that far off, and I think that's going to show come the end of this year. I think when you go back to last year, they got off to a real slow start, new coaching staff, new systems, and they started to kind of turn the roster over. Well, they cleared the roster up by the end of the year. It wasn't by mistake that the Kings won 7 games in a row at the end of the year. They beat some teams that were really good teams and teams that were vying for playoff spots in the schedule at that time. They've come back this year. The record might not reflect it, but if you take a look at it, I think it's 9 or 10 of the games that they played have been decided by 1 goal. And that means including like an empty net goal, like where you're down a goal in the last minute, you might lose by 2, but 9 or 10 of their games have been those 1 goal type of games. Go back to the first 2 games of the season. They had 3-1 leads in the third period against Minnesota. Minnesota tied it to dying seconds and things like that, where they gave up points. So they're not that far off. Bright spots. The Kings, what they've tried to do from the old team to today's team is to become a faster team. It's noticeable. I mean, the team plays with a lot more pace. Todd has done a great job on both ends of the special teams. The power play and the penalty kill are way beyond where they were last year. 5-on-5, they still have a little bit of work to do, and they need to get a little bit of contribution. They're very young on the blue line, especially when you take out Roy and Walker that have missed the last number of games. Kings have already used 10 different defensemen this year. If you take Ole Mata and Drew Doughty out, Doughty's got 950 games, Mata's got 450 games. Aside from that, those other kids, McDermott just played his 100. Roy Walker just played their 100, type of thing. So there's a lot of young kids that are coming. Mikey Anderson, who's playing some, good hockey. He's playing an elevated role right now, playing alongside Drew Doughty. Should he be playing against the top players on the other team? If he was playing on the second or the third set of pair of defensemen, he's probably going to excel a lot more right now. But he's the type of player that can adapt as things go on. Bjornfoot, we just saw him again. He played some games last year. He's just 19 years of age. Kel Clague starting to make a step back there on the blue line. A couple of the forwards, unfortunately last year Kapari got hurt, so he's almost missed an entire year. So he's starting to get some games. We expect to see him at some point through this year. Byfield, Turcotte, Akil Thomas. I mean, there's just a slew of names. So I would think, the Kings are expecting to make the playoffs this year, and they're going to make a serious bid towards it. You're going to see them get on a run where things are going to start to go, and they're going to feed off that. Is there any guarantee? No. I think everybody in the division, in the Honda division, would all agree that one position is up for grabs. Everybody thinks that Colorado, Vegas, and St. Louis are the top 3 teams, and it's tough to argue that. So you got 5 teams vying for one spot. It's going to make a heck of a battle, and it's going to be some good hockey. I think when you see next year, when the team comes to the ice next year, I think there's more of an expectation next year. This year, you might still see a little bit of growth, but next year is an expectation. They're getting the systems down. They're growing in a lot of different parts of the game. It's going to be a matter of putting it all together. This year, Kings, along with everybody else, you're not going to get a lot of practice time. So you're learning during the game. So, again, it's a patient type of thing, but, it's not something that's 5 years away. It's something that, you can see it there. It's coming, and it's coming at a good pace. Is there any guarantee all those young kids that are ranked so high are going to make it? Never a guarantee. But when everybody across the league has you as having the number one, pool of prospects, you're doing something right. So now it's just a matter of, the development staff to put those guys, through the steps and get them prepared. And that's what they're going to do. There's no need to rush them. When they do make that step, you're going to see these kids stick. Look at young Jared Anderson-Dolan, couldn't get in the lineup at the beginning. All of a sudden now he and his line mates are doing a hell of a job and have had some big games. They scored a huge goal the other night against San Jose, in a 6-2 win. They get the fourth goal in the third period as San Jose was trying to get their way back in the game. So a lot of good things happening. It's going to be a lot sooner than a lot of people think.
A lot of potential with the Kings, and their future is very bright there. And speaking about potentials and developing people, before we go, I wanted to tell you how much I hate you, Daryl. Hockey in Canada is changing, but hockey in the States is really growing. There's been huge strides in the last 10 plus years. You can see that in the World Juniors team. Players being drafted, much like Rocco Grimaldi, Austin Matthews, born in California. And it helps when there's individuals like yourself giving back to their communities by coaching and helping out the youth in the area. Why do you care so much?
I take a lot of pride in that. I'll never forget when I first came to Los Angeles and the Kings, had things, like we could sign up and go do it. One was a hockey camp. And I'll never forget the first camp that I went to and looking at the caliber of the players, 15, 16-year-old kid here was probably about the caliber of about an eight-year-old kid back in, in Toronto where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And I said that if I ever was in the area long enough and, I was fortunate enough to be here, that I would get involved in youth hockey and help try to develop and grow the game. I all the way back in Toronto, I started teaching power skating when I was 10 years old. I did camps and clinics. I used to work Eddie Shack's hockey school. So I've always been a big proponent of hockey camps and things like that. We look at our game now, like I'm the president of our girls program, the LA Lions, which have done an incredible job. 2 summers ago, we went into Toronto and we became the first girls team to go into Toronto and win a tournament. Yeah. And we walked out of there with a lot of pride. Then I'll never forget, the teams that we played against. They kind of laughed at us when they looked at the schedule that you're playing, girls from California. They expect to see everybody coming out in bikinis and, bleach blonde hair and away you go. But, we showed them on the ice that the game was growing. We've taken the game, along with the NHL when we went to China a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Well, the Asian community here in Los Angeles, we're now seeing a whole group of families that really never played a lot of hockey growing up there, more into the individual sports. We're now seeing them gravitate towards hockey. We're also seeing, the camps and clinics that we do. We've got a ball hockey program. We're trying to put a stick in a puck or a ball in everybody's hands so we can expose them to our great game of hockey. Our high school leagues are getting better. Our girls programs now are, we've got girls teams that have been ranked number 1 in the country. Mm-hmm. So, these are things that were unheard of before. Sooner or later, we're going to get it where we're going to get Division I, Division II hockey here for, UCLA, USC. That's on the horizon. It's great to see the amount of kids that are being drafted into the NHL from here. And I think that, it builds credibility. The people that are getting involved in coaching, the men and the women, they've come from all different walks of life, all different parts of the country, to bring and contribute something to our great game. So that's making it better for each and every one of these young kids that comes in to try to learn our game. The facilities are getting better. There's more facilities that are out there. Every kid, whether you're in Canada or the United States or any part of the world, look at the things that you can pick up, on the internet, stick handling things, skating things, different type of exercises that you can do. So I think the kids out here, they're trying to prove a point. And in my opinion, they're doing one heck of a job at doing it. It still continues to be the greatest game ever. It involves the whole family, seeing the families come out to the game, whether it's the siblings, the parents, the grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, and all that. It's an addicting game, and it's a lot of fun to watch. And a lot has happened here in 40 years. A lot has happened in 20 years, and even most recently in the last 5-7 years with the growth of girls hockey. Before we had girls hockey, we're talking half the population, 50% of the population. We're not even taking a game to them. So all of a sudden we put the game of hockey on their lap. They're taking it and run with it. We're going to have a professional women's hockey league here, in one day. Hopefully it's in the near future, but the sky's the limit. The more people we can involve, you hear that saying, the NHL preaches, hockey is for everyone. It really is for everyone, because whether you want to do it as a professional or just casual, recreational, it's great for everybody. It doesn't matter what age you are.
Daryl, you've had a great career and you keep giving to your communities. It's great to hear, and thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to be able to talk to you, and keep up the great work. You've done a lot of great things over the years yourself, and keep pushing our great game of hockey, because there's a lot of competition out there with a lot of different things, and when you have a show like yourself, that allows our game to keep popping to the forefront.
Thank you, Daryl.
You're welcome.
Now we head to Music City, USA and talk some Predators. With me to talk Preds, he's covered the Predators in the past, and he's currently has 2 shows. The Stand Up Sitting Down and New and Old Funko Pop unboxings. We'll have links to those shows on our episode page. You can also find them on Twitter at GoverTime. I've enjoyed a couple of those episodes, and I don't know if I caught on very well, but is your co-host for the New and Old Funko Pop unboxings actually named McGillney?
It is. McGillney is his name. He's 8.5 years old now, my son. And yes, he is named after Alexander McGillney. So he's my favorite player growing up. Mm-hmm. And, when you're growing up, actually just in sports in general, right?
Yep.
You end up calling players by their last names, right? Like, Yossi, Forsberg, Marner, whatever. You don't actually say Austin for Matthews, And so, McGillney was so ingrained in me from playing NHL 94 every day after high school. For like 3 or 4 years, that I was like, that'd be kind of a cool name. And then you fast forward to where my wife and I met, and she agreed. And I'm saving you the long version. And and when we had a boy, his name was McGillney. So it was pretty much decided way before I met my wife. So
amazing. So I've 2 things on top of that I'm following up for my story is. Number 1, I did always call Maxim Afinogenov my son because I love the name Maxim. And
yes.
Number 2 is with Afinogenov, I always nicknamed him, and not to put down religion, but I would always say him, he's my God, because he was so outstanding. I had other people have podcasts called The Church of Kako. And I don't know why, when I was a young kid growing up, he's like, this is my God. This guy's amazing. And I love everything about him, especially when he talks with media. It's very rare to get a personality out of a hockey player. And on top of that, how sarcastic McGillney was with reporters after games.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That didn't feed into my opinion of him, of course, because I was too young and it was pre-internet and all that stuff. It was more video game and his explosiveness there, and then watching the highlights, of course, when I could on ESPN, and again, pre-internet, right? So I'm dating myself here, but that's how it is. So and then you collect hockey cards, and you collect, you get hockey magazines like the Hockey News or whatever, and you find at the local Tower Records, which is the only place in California that you could find the, hockey magazines and hockey periodicals. And so you just start to like, man, this guy's really awesome. And 76 goals in a season. What? And then, next thing you know, he's part of course, the famous Russian line with Bure and Fedorov. And then he goes to Vancouver to play with Bure, and then Bure gets hurt. Anyway, it's just I followed his career pretty much from probably year 2, when you kind of, again, non-hockey market, you kind of realize who these guys are, right? And so, and then from then on, it just became a thing where he was just my favorite player growing up. He's the most exciting player to watch on highlights. Obviously, he had speed to burn, and just to be able to see him put up those kind of numbers, finally win a cup with New Jersey, all that, it was really, really great. So,
yeah, I've always actually wanted to do a bit of that defection story too. That would have been really cool.
You know what? The defection story, that the defection, I don't even call it, I guess it's a documentary. It's not a movie, but Defector, I think it was called on, I think TSN did it, I believe.
Yep.
Is absolute must watch for any hockey fan, period. And I just really wish they'd make that available on like iTunes or something so I could buy it instead of find some crappy YouTube copy. But it's really, really great. I highly recommend you go find it if you've not seen it. Alexander McGillney fan, Buffalo Sabres fan or not, if you are a hockey fan or a sports fan, actually, in general, you will love it. It's great.
All right, let's get into some hockey talk with what's going on currently with the Predators. And right now, another game is canceled. And, of course, this wasn't because of COVID. It's because back-to-back games postponed in Dallas, and they're really having struggles with power outages and, of course, the whole terrible winter storm going over there. So that means they've not going to be going to these games. They're postponed for, obviously, this game, and this episode's coming out Wednesday, but that's Monday and Tuesday night. The next 5 games, though, are against Columbus and Detroit, who are also struggling, I would say. And is this a time where the Predators can maybe find themselves and gain some ground in this Discover Central Division?
Yeah, that's a tough one. About a week ago, I'd have said yes. As a matter of fact, I think I tweeted it, actually. You can follow me at Gover Time, by the way. So, selfish plug, like you said earlier. I think I tweeted it a couple last week, was that this was going to be the make or break month, the last 15 days of the month. It was going to be the make or break of the season for the Nashville Predators, because you had, again, 4 against Detroit, 2 more against Columbus, who you'd beat, not handedly, but you'd beat well in the first, the opening weekend of the season. I think there's Chicago, I think was on there. They're storming out of the gate now, but at the time, they looked like they were struggling. So, you had a lot of these kind of opportunistic moments coming up, and then they dropped the second game against Detroit, and they didn't look good doing it. It's totally different, as you know, Peter. I mean, it's totally different if your team or whoever you're watching puts up a Herculean effort and still loses 3-2, or whatever. Like, that happens, right? It's sports. It happens all the time. So that's not the issue. The issue is they look terrible against a lowly Detroit team that really has no business even flirting with victory on most nights. And so it was disappointing. So to answer your question, yes, they could and they should harness the opportunity in front of them with their opponents. The problem is they are now one of those opportunistic opponents, right? Columbus could use the motivation of beating Nashville twice, and all of a sudden they jump back in this thing and hurdle Chicago, and now they're a playoff team, right? So you have to look at both sides of it. I've got some numbers here that I'll go over real quick. I'm sure we'll get to a lot of these, but just suffice it to say, when you think about Columbus and Detroit, right, you think about, okay, these are opponents you should beat, which is absolutely true. You should beat those opponents. The problem is Nashville has the 7th worst offense in the National Hockey League, having only scored 35 goals in their 15 games. And that's, even for some of the historical Nashville teams, that's not terrible. I mean, 7th worst is not great, obviously, but you think, all right, hey, this is a team built on defense. They're a defenseman and goaltending factory. They'll be fine for the most part, right? But that's not the case either. They have the 3rd worst defense as far as goals per game is concerned. Only, they've offense, excuse me, third worst offense at 2.33 goals per game scored, but they also have the 6th worst defense in the National Hockey League, having allowed 52 goals in the 15 games. As you can see, again, there's more numbers there, but as you can see, that's not the right formula, and you can't take anybody lightly now. So when Detroit comes to town and you don't beat them you don't sweep that series, but it tends to be a lot. Again, Detroit can play well and you kind of win, you kind of just deal with it, right? But when you struggle against the Detroit team, you can no longer take anybody else for granted, especially when after this month is over, after the month of February, the calendar month of February is over. Nashville will be lucky to be 500, and that is going to be a huge mountain to climb when the trade deadline is only about, I think it's like 2 months away now.
You tweeted a couple days ago, sorry folks, but there's definitely enough blame to go around. I still don't believe the hashtag Preds roster is the problem. I think the roster is a bunch of guys trying to do right by the coach and trying to implement whatever it is he wants to do. So who's primarily to blame here? And it does seem like you're kind of implying that it's Coach John Hynes.
I am implying that. That was kind of my nice way to point blame at somebody. And here's why. Okay, like, yes, I also tweeted this later on in the thread.
Yeah.
They don't have a hyper talent, right? Like Stamkos or Marner or Matthews or McDavid or Draisaitl or Barkov. They don't have these guys. Okay. There's Philip Forsberg is as close as it gets, who, by the way, is a ridiculously underrated player.
Yes.
For the rest of the league, who doesn't get to see him on a nightly basis, he is insane. At least once or twice a night, he makes some ridiculous move, whether it ends up being a scoring chance or not. It could be a defensive play. I saw him flip a puck over a defenseman's head on the penalty kill once just to kill time. I mean, just insane stuff. Yeah. So he's super underrated. He's as close as it gets. If he's in Vancouver or New York, right, he's a household name. But that's not the point. The point is that they've got guys who any second line in the entire league would love to have. Johansson, people have issues with him, and that's fine. But listen to these numbers. Johansson is a 5-time 60-point scorer. Matt Duchene, who was the big ticket free agent a couple off seasons ago, 3-time 60-point scorer. Philip Forsberg, we mentioned him. He's a 2-time 30-goal scorer. Should have had three times. Should be a 3-time, but he missed a few games with injury. One of those seasons he ended up with like 28 or something. Victor Arvidsson is a 2-time 30-goal scorer, and the third time he had 29. So basically, he's a 3-time 30-goal scorer. Granlund is a 2-time 65-point scorer, and arguably the best forward, again, other than Forsberg, under Coach Hines since he got here.
Yeah.
Haula, former 55-point scorer. That you can say that was a one-off, and that's fine. But either way, he's a 55-point scorer. And then you have Roman Josi, who's last year's Norris Trophy winner. He's a 5-time 50-point scorer from the blue line. Okay. So you put all those players together and you put that on paper and you're like, yeah, this team should have some pretty good depth scoring. But it's not. It's the opposite. The opposite is happening. There's nobody scoring. Mm-hmm. Again, 2.33 goals per game is stupid with a roster like that. Now, again, I'm no way, shape, or form saying that this team is full of Mitch Marners, Austin Matthews, and Bart. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But I am saying that if you have, 6 players that should be scoring 55 to 60 points in their sleep, then you should have an attack, especially a power play, who just goes for the jugular and puts up some points and gives your team a chance to win games. Instead, that's not happening. So what I'm saying is that's not GM David Poyle's fault. David Poyle has always been knocked on for not being able to produce offensive talent, right? He always drafts solid defensemen. They come up and they're NHL defensemen, whether they're Norris Trophy caliber or just steady NHL defensemen is not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is it's all across the board. Defensemen and goaltending, he has a knack and a reputation for developing those. Okay, so his weak suit has been forwards. So he uses a defensive strong point of like Seth Jones, for example, to go out and address a need that this franchise has always had in getting Ryan Johansson, a number one center. Now, is he a number one center on, 20 of the 30 teams? No, but he's definitely a second line center on those teams. Mm-hmm. And so you have to think that, okay, that gives them depth down the middle too. So for all these guys to struggle, now again, Johansson's hurt, so just go with me on this. But if all these guys are not putting up these points, or they're not putting up production numbers like that at all, not even coming close, then who do you blame at? You don't blame Poyle, who went out and did all he could to get, again, Barkov, Stamkos, these guys don't come on the market very often. So you can't just go out and get those guys. And the Predators have been so competitive throughout their entire existence. They haven't really picked high. And the one time they did, when it was 4th overall, they thought they were going to get Barkov. He goes to Florida. They end up with Seth Jones, who turns into Ryan Johansson. So my point is that there's enough talent on this roster that is not producing in the way they should. And so therefore you have to blame the coaches. You can't sit there and be like, oh, well, this team's just not good enough. Any team in the league would have these 6 guys in their second line. Any team would have it on the second. So therefore it has to be coaching, in my opinion. I know there's more than enough blame to go around. I get that. Okay. Like, I'm not saying Poyle's getting off scot-free, and I'm certainly not saying the players aren't getting off scot-free, but I am saying, if you want to give me a pie chart and you want to take out the biggest section, it goes to coaching.
You mentioned a couple of those players, and many of them are struggling, I'd say. And it goes back to last season as well. And there's Victor Arvidsson, there's Ryan Johansson. Ryan specifically has no goals, 4 assists before his week-to-week upper body injury. What's missing from his game last year, this year so far?
So this year, again, we don't know what the injury is, so I can't sit here and say, oh, well, he's been dealing with a bum knee, and now I'm making that up. He's dealing with a bum knee, And now it finally got to him, and he's got to sit out. Like I don't know what it is, so I can't sit there. Or a bad back. I mean, like Arvidsson had last year, for example, in that St. Louis game when he got hurt and got hit in the back, cross-checked in the back, if I remember correctly, and he sat out several weeks or whatever to heal up, and so he kind of had some issues with that. But for Ryan Johansson in particular, my issue is he should be obviously producing more. But I also think we've seen what this team is without him, right? So yes, he only has 4 points in 10 games. They're all assists, and that's hardly ideal, right? And then last year during a down season, he had 36 points, which is half of his average, by the way, is half of his seasonal average. He had 36 points in 68 games. Again, not great. Certainly not what you pay a top line center for. But I do wonder if there are other things at play there. I think that not necessarily a change of scenery, not that. But, I wonder if it's more than the game, right? He's definitely getting his chance with this season, especially when he was playing with Arvidsson and Forsberg. I mean, Nashville as a city would rejoice that that line was back together, where they weren't really when John Hines took over. He was trying to figure out which pieces would play. And I will say that, yes, Johansson's been frustrating in some respects, but he was one of their best players in the playoffs. So when the chips are down and the games matter, Ryan Johansson shows up to play. Now, there's a whole other philosophy as to why a player can't do that in the regular season, but and they may not make the playoffs if you don't do that. So there's a domino effect there. But I think at the end of the day, you have a guy who is a big game player. I still believe the Predators win the Stanley Cup in 2017 if they have Ryan Johansson in the lineup, if he doesn't go down with an injury. So Ryan Johansson needs to be better for sure. He needs to be the best player on the ice, honestly, when he comes back, if the Predators are even remotely in a playoff position. But I just do think there's something else that we don't know of that's going on with Ryan Johansson.
That's a shame, and hopefully he recovers from that. I did want to speak about Filip Forsberg, but you mentioned him. He's playing extremely well so far. 7 goals, 14 points. He's obviously, with the struggles of a lot of other players too, he has more than double the amount of goals than everybody else. He seems like above and beyond. Why is everything clicking for number 9 so far this year?
It's a good question because, again, Forsberg is a ridiculously underrated player. If he was playing in a bigger market, he would have fanfare galore. I firmly believe that. You hear a lot of Nashville fans or Nashville, if he was playing, and Yossi would have won a Norris before, whatever. But that's not entirely true because Shea Weber should have won a Norris and when he was here and he didn't, right? So that's not entirely true. But Forsberg specifically, I do 100% believe that if he was in a Canadian market or a bigger market in the States, he would be a superstar. He's awesome and he's ridiculously talented, but it's working for him right now because it's 14 points in 15 games, like you mentioned, 7 and 7 each, but he's also only a -1. And usually you wouldn't applaud a -1, but considering this team has mightily struggled, right? He's one of the leaders as far as the guys who have played every game. So there's that as well. He's defensively responsible. He can start rushes from his own end, from his own blue line. He carries the puck into the zone very, very well. The issue that he should be a 20-point guy, honestly, but the power play has struggled so much for Nashville that it's the 8th worst power play in the league, by the way, just 14.6%. So if that was even remotely good, even average, he'd have a lot more points for sure. Forsberg benefits a lot from chemistry with his line mates. Yes, he can make things happen by himself, like what I just said. He can start rushes out of his own end. I mean, there's a lot. He's electric in overtime, so there's a lot of things that he can do well. But he's obviously at his best when the defense is being drawn to somebody else. So if he's playing with Duchesne, or if he's playing with Arvidsson and Johansson, for example, they command respect when they're playing well. They command respect. Johansson's a wizard playmaker, right? Arvidsson's got a terrific shot. Forsberg can do both. So if the defense tries to shut down Arvidsson or pays attention too much to the points on the power play, for example, Ellis has got a bomb, as we all know, especially in Canada, and Roman Josi, of course, is the Norris Trophy winner. So if you are paying attention to those guys and you let Forsberg have any space whatsoever, he'll make you pay. Now, again, as of this season, it might not result in a goal, but a scoring chance and maybe an offensive zone faceoff. So Filip Forsberg does a lot of great things on the ice. Putting up points is definitely one of them, and he is leading the team by a large margin with 14 points in the young season. But he is at his best when his line mates are being paid attention to, and it's not just him.
If his line mates were better. Okay. I think he's a bit of a lightning rod. It feels like it from outside of Nashville looking in, but Pekka Rinne, it seems like he's getting a bit longer in the tooth, and he's 38 years of age now. I know there's been rumblings for maybe a few years now that his stats are a bit of inflated because of that defensive core that they have that's so great. Is it time maybe now to move on from Rinne?
It's a tough one because I think if there's anybody you would say is a career Predator, you put Pekka Rinne's name, and I was gonna say pencil, and then I got twisted. I got Pekka Rinne's name in there, but at the same time, I think a lot of fans would somebody suggested a Ray Bourque type thing where they ask Pekka where he wants to go to a true contender, even if it's a backup role, right? Because I mean, let's be honest, he's basically the backup right now, unfortunately. So if he goes to a true contender and can maybe win himself a cup, and then Nashville celebrates whatever. They do the same thing with Shea Weber, by the way, even though it was different circumstances. But when Trotz won, Barry Trotz is a great example. When he won the Stanley Cup, the city of Nashville threw a party. I mean, for him on his behalf. So it's like that. He's revered. Pekka Rinne is, and so I think if he went somewhere else, he'd have to go to a contender. And I don't think the organization would trade him to, I don't know, Detroit for a top round pick. Like I think they would have his best interest in mind. That being said, yeah, he is getting long in the tooth. He is 38 years old. My thing with Rinne is he's better than his stats are. Because think of this, okay? So he's played 9 games. Saros has played 9 as well, but Rinne's played 9 games. He's 3-5-0. Doesn't exactly, wow you at all. His goals against average is 2.74, which also doesn't wow you. But you think, hey, with 2 full lines of players that should be scoring 55, 60 points a season, 2.74 should be enough to win on most nights. It's not, because the opposite is happening. There's no defense in front of them, it seems like, and the offense isn't clicking at all. The power play isn't clicking, and they have the second worst penalty kill in the league at 67.8%, which is horrid. So the goaltenders are being subjected to that. But I would say that Rinne is the better of the 2 goaltenders right now, and his numbers reflect that. Again, 2.74 goals against. And again, that .907 save percentage also should not be – that's not a winning save percentage in this century of hockey, right? You go back to the 80s, it might be. But right now, it's, .907 is not really that good enough. But, again, if the power play was clicking and he had more goal support, it'd be a different story. I got one last stat for you. In the first period, the Predators have scored 7 goals in 15 games in the first period. Okay. They've also allowed 16 in those 15 games. That means they're playing from behind a lot. In the second period, they're tied for the league worst with only 6 goals in those 15 games. So their offense kicks in the third period, where they have the third most goals in the third period across the league with 20 goals in the 15 games. But they can't dig themselves out of a hole. When you spotted teams like Tampa, a 4-0 lead or a 3-0 lead, Dallas, when you're spotting Dallas a 2-3 to 4-0 lead, 4-1 lead, you can't do that and expect to win. And these goaltenders have to play different when they don't have run support, and they also play different when they don't have confidence in the guys in front of them, right? Because what is a goaltender? I don't know if you played goal or not, but I used to play goal, so not to this level by any means. But what do you do when you trust your defense or the players in front of you to take away this pass over here or take away the back door or whatever the case is, right? The real basics, right? Okay, I know that so and so is going to have my right if I can just take away the shot here. Or I know he's on the back check. He's closer to the puck handler. I'm going to try to cheat to the shot a little, or cheat to the pass a little bit, let him take the pass. Those are things that the goaltenders think about. When you have no confidence in the guys in front of you, or very little, I would say, because, Yossi, Ellis, Ekholm, Fabro, these are pretty good defensemen usually. Yeah. So you have very little confidence in the defense in front of you, you start doing too much. And when you do too much and start thinking the game, that's when you suffer.
Speaking about Pekka Rinne, I think most teams during a draft usually draft the best player available. But in this instance, maybe in the last draft, the Preds might have drafted for position here. Yaroslav Astrakov, the goaltender, drafted 11th overall, the 2020 draft, a.k.a. the Machine. He's had tremendous numbers at both St. Petersburg and in Russia for the under-20 team the last few years. Is it possible we see him come over soon then? And what is his playing style?
I can't speak to his playing style, but I can say that I've seen plenty of highlights and game clips, and the kid is tremendous. I mean, he's just tremendous. He is the future, I believe. But if you'd asked me that 4 years ago about UC Saros, I'd have said the same thing. So they got UC Saros for a steal. I think he was 99th overall in the draft, and right when he was taken, you saw all kinds of scouts on Twitter pop up. Right, not scouts, sorry, like just draft experts like Bob McKenzie, right, Darren Drager, these guys that cover the prospects in depth, and all of them are saying the Preds got a steal here. If he was 3 inches taller, he'd have been a first rounder. All this great stuff. So I bought into that Saros as well, and I do believe Saros is a good goaltender. I just don't think right now he's playing like a starter. As far as Askarov goes, he was taken 11th overall by Nashville, and I do think it was the not this, I don't want to say the writing on the wall, because I do think that, again, at the time the jury was still out on Saros, but I think it was more of an insurance policy. If Saros can't be the guy, we've got this guy, right? And we hope they're both starting goaltenders, because what's the best case scenario, right? Best case scenario is Saros goes off, runs with it, Askarov becomes trade bait, you trade for a position of need, right? Yeah. So that's the best case. They did that with Seth Jones, like I said earlier, right? That Seth Jones, they didn't need a defenseman. But here's this blue chip franchise defenseman sitting there at 4, and it fell off pretty well after 4. So they're like, well, we were going to take him, and then they turned that into a position of need. So I think Askarov is the guy. I mean, a 951 save percentage in the KHL is bonkers.
Yeah,
and that's what he's got, right? Let alone his goals against is 121. Those are Tim Thomas type numbers in his Vezina year. So again, it's KHL. I get that, but all he can do is be the best goaltender he can be at the level he's at. And he is showing that he can do that. And so I don't know if he'll be over next year. I don't want to say that. I think it's a little too soon. They might need a stopgap or something in between. But I do think starting in 2022, 23, is that right? Yeah. 22, 23, I think you could see him in gold.
Again, you can find him on Twitter at GoverTime. Thanks for coming on the show, Jeremy.
Oh, thanks so much, Peter. I appreciate it.
I want to thank all our guests joining the show this week. It was good breaking down the Sens and Canes trade with Brett and Colin. I enjoyed the Predators chat with Jeremy. It was interesting to see how they can maybe string some wins together in the next 2 weeks. If not, maybe it's time to make some moves. And finally, a great chat I had with Daryl. It was amazing. I was really glad to talk to him about his story and how much he's already done in his career. And I also loved hearing about how he gets his suits done. Thank you, gentlemen. Remember, if you have enjoyed anything on this episode or you didn't, please tweet me or our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at Russia98 or the entire team at Jablam Sports. If you want, you can contact us, or if you have any questions or ideas for the show, also, you can use the hashtag Jablam Sports, that's JABLAM Sports, or you can go to our contact page on our website, jablamsports.com/contact. Please check out our website, again, jablamsports.com, to see all our podcast episodes and even game notes for every episode. You'll get the info from our guests and links to things we mentioned on the show. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. Also, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends. You can also follow us on our Facebook group. This week's shout out is to Brendan Bouchard. He's one of the few people that really helped me on this journey of refocusing my career, health, and goals. Thank you, Brendan. And to every one of our listeners, I'm giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.